Well, good. All right, we can call the meeting to order, 6:04. First item on our agenda is our open forum. Nobody has signed up for the open forum, so. And we will move on to our board calendar.
Okay, board calendar is there just for update. Items we're doing now are the calendar for next year, the board elections timeframe we talked about last time, and we'll have our financial statement review tonight as well. Then really, I think it just gets to the consent agenda. Don't have my report in there at all, but just the minutes from the previous meeting, January 26th and February 2nd, which reflect our last two meetings. And so if there's any questions on that, feel free. Otherwise, I'll pass it back to Shane.
What do the numbers mean on the, or I'm sorry, I'm going under the agenda. I was asking about the calendar. Sorry.
The consent agenda?
Oh, there on the school calendar, there's like a list of like student teacher with numbers. I just didn't know what that was for.
Yeah.
I believe those are the days.
Days.
The contact days.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So the
Thank
teachers
you.
have 187 days and the students 172.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Yep, very familiar with that. Ours typically have it on the side, like on the Fridays, but. All right, any other questions on that? All right, so looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
All right, Bob, a second? Second. All right, Kristen, okay. Any further discussion or questions on the consent agenda? All right, hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to our agenda for this evening, starting with the 2021-2022 school calendar. I believe, Kelly, were you going to?
Yep, I'll introduce that and try to answer any questions you might have. This calendar is very similar to last year, or the year we're living in. It is in line with Stillwater's calendar because we are tied to their transportation, and if we choose to operate outside of their days, we do pay for transportation. So that is one parameter we operate in. Another parameter we operate in is within the state statute guidelines of how many minutes, how many days each age band of students needs to be in session. This calendar as presented has 172 student contact days for upper school. That's 2 days more than is required by statute. Middle school, 172, which is 2 days more. Middle school, 5-6. We had different bands for 7-8 and 5-6. And that has 16 days more than is required. Lower school has quite a bit more, 14 days for grades 1 through 4, and kindergarten has 28 days more than is required by statute. But that's a starting point to make sure we're meeting those guidelines. An overview on how this compares to prior year, our lower school student day count is the same. Our middle school and upper school is the same at 172. Returning staff days are the same at 186. New staff days are the same at 191. Our vacation days, this is for 12-month employees, is increased 1 day this year from 15 to 16, and that is just because of how the July 4th week off fell in 2016. Sometimes that falls a bit in the year before, and sometimes, so this year in FY22, it falls entirely within FY22, so that number count bumped up. That is a bit higher than many 12-month employees receive as vacation days, but it has always been accepted as a nod to the additional strain and intensity of the school year. So that week off that is provided on July 4th is kind of a nod to the unique environment of working in this school environment versus a traditional office environment. The no school purple days, those are professional development days, and that is 14, consistent with prior year. And new teacher workshop days are consistent with 5, as in prior years. So, any questions on the calendar?
I have none. Anyone? Questions on the calendar?
Why'd they move spring break back up?
Because Stillwater moved spring break back up.
I'm just wondering,
Yeah, I
was
don't
wondering
know.
if there's a reason why.
They also moved away from a longer break over MEA, that mid-October, so they're breaking that up again a little bit more than in the past couple of years.
Yeah, wasn't it like a week or something this past year or something?
I think it was like 2 years ago.
Maybe that was 2 years ago. It was a bit longer this year.
Okay,
Um,
all right. Thank you. All right, so no questions on that? All right, looking,
Administration looked at the calendar?
Yes, thanks for asking. The administration poured over this, and it has their blessing, so.
all right, so looking for a motion to approve the 2021-2022 school calendar.
So moved.
All right, Deb, thank you. A second?
Second.
All right, Nicole, thank you. Any further comments or discussion on the calendar? All right, hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. All right, our next item is the approval of the revised learning model transition plan. And John, I believe you're going to discuss.
Yep. I'll take help from Candace and Kelly. So we went through this last time, just about the temperature check and some of the safety protocols we wanted to implement into the learning model transition plan. We talked about the reasons from what we had before is purely quantitative. Now this is more qualitative, with the COVID case rates being the foundation for the discussion. So this is something we are starting to implement, even with the review of the safety procedures. The only changes to this really are that we have, I think, changed some verbiage on related to getting accurate information from staff and parents about symptoms and so on. And then also on the safety measures rubric, we've also added information related to activities. So everything related to capacity and practices and games and that sort of thing. So those are things that are being monitored now. So from that perspective, hopefully this is something we can move forward with. The idea with this is that we will report on this every week with our COVID response team and the board back to school committee. And so we'll review that. And then based on that, we'll make a determination whether we need to have a board meeting or a special board meeting to recommend a change in the learning model. With this, we still have the option in cases where we need to, where we can isolate and quarantine classrooms or grades if necessary. Right now, we feel extremely fortunate that we haven't had a COVID case because when they're in smaller classrooms, and the likelihood of quarantining or isolating the whole classroom is much more likely than it was when we had 6-foot physical distancing. So Candace, comments on this or anything else on this that you can think of?
Nope.
Okay. Kelly, and when are we going to have the first, is it this Friday or is it next Friday?
What's that?
For the first meeting or update?
Yeah, Friday. We have a standing 12 noon meeting on Fridays.
Yep, okay. So, questions on this at all?
A piece that we didn't cover at our work session was the kind of the preamble or the to the guidelines. We agreed to the substance of it, but other than the temporary transition, we're proposing that remains in here, and up to 2 staff planning days remains as a part of this. But to give the new newly assembled COVID response team and this more nuanced approach, What we've taken out of here is that must provide the SCPA community with at least 2 weeks' notice. We know sometimes that's not possible. And when transitioning to a new learning model, we will remain in the model for no less than 4 weeks. We're just proposing taking those out of the guidelines.
Good.
Thank you. And you said the first meeting for this will be this coming Friday?
Well, we have been meeting bi-weekly for the last month, but the first official meeting under the newly approved updated plan.
Yep. Okay. All right. All right, so looking for a motion to approve the revised learning model transition plan. So moved. Krista or Jake? Jake, all right, second?
Second.
All right, Nicole. All right, any further comments, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is the student return to the building next step planning.
Okay. I'll go through this, and everyone that's been on the calls and meetings can feel free to jump in. I'll try and summarize this. So we had our RST meeting on February 10th. Basically, the option we had decided to try to get approved, and actually that we thought we would get approved quite easily, was the 5-12 hybrid to begin on February 22nd. We thought this would, well, I guess we assumed incorrectly, but we thought this would be relatively easy to approve because COVID case rate data for the county had declined to the point where hybrid would be acceptable. And it was, our lower school was in person. And so this falls within the Minnesota Safe Learning Plan as it had been presented to us and we've lived with from the end of July through probably December 21st. And so the idea was to present that and then to see if we could leap to a in-person solution. We met resistance with the 5-12 hybrid model. We're still a little bit surprised on that, but what they have held on to is as they roll students back into school, they want 3 grades implemented every 2 weeks. And in the call that we had with them on January 6th, they said that we could try to get more grades in if we could treat our divisions as separate buildings. So we did some work on that. Then when we presented that, they acknowledged our work, but said that we didn't have separate buildings, but only one building. So they changed their emphasis a little bit on that. So in the options that we presented, option 2 being the one that we led with 5-12 hybrid, they said that they would let us go 4 grades. And they said that we could even combine that with in a division manner. So prior to that, they said they would allow us to go 2 grades per division, 5, 6, 9, 10, which was part of our original proposal. But then the minute they said that we could bring a division back, we went back and had conversations as a leadership team and as the COVID response team and back to school board committee, and came up with a recommendation of going back as a division. So it's just a matter of which division we would want to roll back first. After discussion, it was decided on upper school and then middle school after that. The reason, I'll let Candace explain this, but there are some isolation procedures which make going back as a division much more beneficial than going back with 2 grades at a time. I'll let you walk through that.
Yeah, it helps us do it as, we can see the flow of things. It's one thing to have it on paper and know how we hope it goes, but to have the kids in the building will help us see, and that's what they pointed out too, where our issues might be, keeping them, continuing to keep the social distancing, and put into practice basically our safety assessment. So those pieces, and then just having a division, even though they acknowledged that we had worked to separate the buildings, but it was only one, that kept them in that one space, and we didn't have to worry about those crossovers that we knew were going to occur between middle and upper school.
And then the reason I think for the upper school selection is just because of their GPAs, some of their academic classes, some of the college counseling and admissions, some of the AP test preparation. It doesn't minimize the challenges of the 5 through 8. So we had that conversation, just decided that upper school would be the one that we would want to bring in first on February 22nd. If we have additional questions on that, Wanda and Amy can address that. And with that, then what we would do is, because it's a distance to hybrid, also this is what they suggested as well, is they didn't like the fact that, because we approached them on the in-person model, they didn't like us skipping from distance to in-person. They preferred to have it staggered, so it'd go hybrid, and then it'd go to in-person. And I think that's kind of it. With that, then we just need 1 day of transition for the upper school and 1 day of transition for the middle school. So if this plan's adopted, we would just need 1 transition day for the upper school on February 19th, and then 1 day for the middle school, which is on March 5th. So, so with questions on that?
John, do you want to mention our next regional support meeting and
Oh, yeah.
go for that?
I'll say this first. Yeah. So we have, so February 22nd would be the upper school. March 8th would be the middle school back in hybrid. Our next regional support team meeting is on March 10th, and then our next board meeting is on March 16th. And I would just suggest moving forward with this. I just got an email saying that I have a call with Governor Walz tomorrow on ways to get middle school and upper school students back into school faster. So like these things always change. So at least we're moving forward. So that helps.
And did they articulate why they don't recommend skipping over distance learning? Or,
No, they just
Like-
they prefer that.
okay,
I mean, there are schools that are looking at doing that and are doing that. They just said they prefer the least aggressive, you know?
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, John.
Yep.
And then I will just add that as of right now, we do have a meeting scheduled for the 23rd. So John said our next meeting is March 16th. As of right now, we do have a meeting scheduled for February 23rd, excuse me. But I will be recommending that we move that since to after our regional support team meeting in the beginning of March. So as of right now, we do have a meeting scheduled for the 23rd of February, but if approved, the March 16th will be our next one, just for clarification.
So should we start with a motion to cancel that meeting unless the governor's guidance somehow would make us change things? Yeah, otherwise we'd have to call an emergency meeting. I don't know what the call is about, but
Right.
we could make a motion to cancel unless it would require a transition that we would need it or something. I don't know how to word it.
Okay.
I don't know.
I mean, I'm guessing tomorrow I'm just going to get a philosophical sort of thing. Also because generally if I get something, it just says it's going to be a conference call with the governor and it'll discuss ways to get middle school and high school students back in. If it was something related to a press conference, it'd say that it's confidential until 2 o'clock. So I know there's not going to be a press release or anything on it. So I'm guessing it's just going to be more strict outline of ideas, if that makes sense.
Let's nix that one, and then if we have to call an emergency meeting, if there's something groundbreaking, we can always go back and do that, right?
Actually, I just wanted, if I could go back to where we talked about going from distance or hybrid to in-person. So in my notes, I wrote down that the reason for that was to get in place our mitigation strategies because they're still in the smaller cohort, that blue gold cohort. So to refine those, that was what I put in my notes of their reasoning for why to do that.
Thank you.
And just so, I mean, we've been on these calls a few times, and so I think originally, maybe our first call, or it could have been the January 6th call, the process is, they give us guidance, and then if they have concerns about our implementation, concerns is the word used, then what they would do is they would probably call the commissioner, and the commissioner would then probably call us and express her concerns and strongly advise us to make changes. Strongly advise is, I don't really want to explain what that means, but it means we would change our position. So when we asked specifically, because we asked about in-person, we asked about the 512 hybrid many times in many different ways. And, we just specifically asked if we implemented 512 hybrid, would we be a school of concern? And they nodded their heads and said yes. So that means we have to have conversations and do things which aren't pleasurable. That makes sense.
All right.
I think just one important thing to add to that is, the tone of that though was just encouraging sort of a thoughtful, phased-in approach, right? Like their goal was essentially, they were saying, do to some degree what you're doing in the lower school, right? Like get K2 in, and then make sure what you're doing is working, and then get 3-4 in, then make sure what you're doing is working. So it wasn't to come at us. It was just wanting to make sure that after you take each step, you have sure footing, which, I guess I feel good about.
Thank you. All right, so we're looking for a motion to approve the learning model transition plan for upper school and middle school.
So just so I'm clear, is this going to be an amendment on the previous motion? Because there's an existing motion in place for the hybrid and for when they go in person. And so I'm assuming we're just amending the first part of that motion so that it's, instead of 5 and 6 and 9 and 10, it's 9 through 12.
Correct.
Yeah, it would be 9/12 on February 22nd and 5/8 on March 8th.
Yeah, no, I know. The motion we have approved already, it just says 5, 6, 9, 10, but then on March 22nd, it has 5 through 8 in person or hybrid. And we had, I think, in the previous motion said in person, assuming nothing changes. And so I guess I'm just wondering, are we making an amendment to it? Or are we just, I'm just wondering, are we just making a new motion then, or? Because usually when there's already one approved, we amend it. I'm looking at the board meeting that when it, so it looks like what we had approved was 5, 6, 9, 10 hybrid on the 22nd, 7, 8, 11, 12 hybrid on the March 8th. Then the March 22nd and the April 5th for the 5, 8, and 9, 12 in-person dates. And so would we just be amending the 22nd and 8th dates to essentially kind of match the 22nd and 5th in terms of the grade bands, and then it would just be hybrid on the 22nd and 8th? Just replace it?
Yeah.
Really just replace them.
Yep.
Okay, then I would suggest we keep the 22nd and 5th in the new motion for the in-person return dates, because as we've seen in our community around us, everybody's going in person, and we're already going to be one of the later ones going in person. So I don't think that we should replace the motion and not have that in it.
That's, Kristen, in our meeting, they said that that's not true. That those that are publicizing in person are probably those that are in the rural community, and they even cast some doubt on those that have tentative plans. So it doesn't matter to me. I think we can do whatever we want with the motion and keep the 5/12 in person on March 22nd, but we know that's going to be subject to our regional support team meeting on the 10th, so
Yeah.
either one doesn't
Stillwater
matter to me.
has March 15th. Yeah, Stillwater has 7/8 on the 15th and 9-12 on the 5th. So they're not rural. And they're going in person then.
That's the one that they expressed question on how viable that was going to be, and that's 4 days.
Oh, okay. I thought
Where
that was
sh-
Lakeville, because Lakeville was the one that is skipping hybrid altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was Forest
No, Forest Lake, South Washington County, Stillwater, all of them,
Okay,
so.
okay.
But I may hear something differently tomorrow.
All right. So were we keeping our existing motion?
I think we should be keeping what we had before about the 22nd and 8th. And like John said, if something changes, we can change it. But I think it's better to plan for in-person and move towards that.
Absolutely.
All right.
There's nothing wrong with leaving those marks, stakes in the ground for those days.
All right.
Right?
All right. So what are we agreeing on here? We're agreeing
to amend the original motion
with the
dates provided in this motion.
okay. Agree. Amend.
Read the dates.
We could just make a motion to rescind the previous motion and replace it with the 22nd being 9-12 hybrid,
Current.
the 8th being 5
5
through 8
through
hybrid,
8.
the 22nd of March being 5 through 8 in person.
Sorry.
Has that been defined yet, if that's 4 or 5 days, or is that still a work in progress? Work in progress, okay. And then April 5th is upper school 9-12.
All right.
It'd be the other, right, they're backwards now.
Mhm.
It would be backwards. If we're bringing back upper school first, then upper school would come back first in person, and then middle,
Mm.
then middle.
Okay.
So the,
And just to clarify, that was not part of the motion, it was part of the documents, but the actual motion that was made did not include the back-to-school days. So,
I thought we had adopted what you had proposed.
right, which was, and I just pulled up the actual motion. I move that we bring grades 5, 6, 9, 10 back on February 22nd, and 7, 8, 11, 12 back on March 8th in the hybrid learning model as adopted in first semester, with February 17th through 19th as transition days for all 512 staff, with the condition that this learning model complies with the amended learning model plan. The back-to-school target dates were published in the board document, but they were not part of the motion.
So we're good.
And I think we continued to target in-person learning by March 22nd,
Yep.
Provided it's recommended. Our COVID response team recommends it, or RST recommends it, and the board approves it.
Yep.
I think it's still important to include it, though, seeing that our next board meeting isn't until March 16th, and this would be the following week. And I think from what we've seen, like, if we are presenting this to them with a plan, they tend to be okay with it as long as it isn't crazy. And
They
so
weren't okay with the plan we presented this last time.
well, they said that it was more aggressive. They said it was most aggressive to go in person next week. They didn't say we couldn't do it, but they said that it would make them concerned.
They said they had a public health concern with bringing back everybody in person that close to spring break.
Mhm.
That's what the lady from the Department of Health said.
Mhm.
So.
I mean,
I think
adopting it tonight doesn't allow us to use the system that we're voting on establishing tonight. I mean, that would disregard what we're talking about doing with the COVID response team and the back to school committee. I mean, the creation of that group is to allow us to use all of this stuff to determine how to move forward when that time comes. So we can't set something out without, I mean, to set that out means that we're not doing any of the stuff that we just already voted on.
Otherwise, the committee we're bypassing the committee and
Completely.
giving them an edict that,
And ignoring what the RST told us in the last meeting.
yes.
We didn't ask about this in the last meeting. I'm okay with not including it as long as we have confirmation from staff that if we did approve that on March 16th, they would be okay, they'd be prepared the 22nd. I just know if it's in a motion and it's like kind of there as like a goalpost, it's a lot easier to prepare, but I just don't want to come to that meeting and then need like another few weeks before we could even go to it.
I don't think it's in need of more weeks. We already have that as a stakeholder of when we want to be back. So I don't think it changes that. That's the dates we published. That's the dates we already put out. So other than the change in grades, I don't think it changes the fact that that's our goal.
We did eliminate that language in the amended transition plan as well, the requiring 2 weeks notice for that reason.
Okay.
So do we have the language? Susan, do you have the language for that,
I have it.
for the motion? Yeah. Oh, Kelly, okay.
So I can read it and someone can say so moved. How's that sound? I move we bring grades 9, 12 back to school on February 22nd and 5, 8 on March 8th in the hybrid learning model as adopted in the first semester of FY21. With February, and then with February 20, what's the date? 19th as a transition day for 9-12 and March 5th as a transition day for 5-8.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Nicole? All right, further comment or discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, and I want to thank you for the clarification. I apologize, I was not able to attend the RST meeting the last one. We did have a couple teachers that wanted to participate as well, so Drew and I allowed teachers to take our seats in that meeting, so thank you.
Thank you for letting us do that.
Yes, you're very welcome. All right. What's that?
Asked if it was helpful.
Oh, yeah, great. All right. So we're moving on to the financial statement review. Kelly, you were going to introduce that for us. Thank you.
This is December year-to-date financial review. They were 50% of the way through the year. We submitted the financials in the packet, but added a higher level summary here that hopefully each person received. Let's just start with the summary, and if you have detailed questions, we can dive into the financial packet. Okay, December 31st, 2020. I'd like to first start with year-to-date actual and where are we compared to being 50% through the year. So if you look at our summary page, revenues, I've highlighted in yellow the percentages year-to-date that I'd like to address. But total revenues of 7.3 million are 50% of our budgeted revenue, our reforecasted budget revenue. And total expenditures are 46% of our budgeted reforecasted revenues or expenditures. Both of those are consistent with prior year. Our expenses do tend to lag a bit behind our revenue with timing differences. So in each of those variances that are more than 5%, plus or minus 50%. Each of those are attributed to timing differences that are consistent with prior years. But for the federal revenue, we have 58% of our revenue. If you recall, we usually are lagging behind on our receiving federal revenue. Usually we don't receive it until it's been expended. But with all of the CARES funding that we've received, that was received in bulk in December. So we're tracking ahead of federal revenue. You probably won't see that again for, hopefully, the foreseeable future, because I don't want to receive CARES funding because that means we're in a pandemic. So total expenditures and revenue year-to-date are on track with prior years. It's an alarming number that we have net income year-to-date at $520,000, but that is because our expenditures are lagging behind. That's always a good benchmark to see if we're on track to, if our budget is sensical. Moving over to the budget tower of numbers, the first column there is the reforecasted budget. Next column, approved budget, and then the variances, both dollar and percentage. Total revenues have been reforecasted from 15.2 million to 14.5 million. That's a net reduction of revenue of 696,000. It's a big number, but not entirely unexpected. If we look at state revenue, we're expecting 196,000 less than we had originally budgeted. That is largely attributed to a decrease in enrollment of 17 students. In a typical year, we would have been backfilling that. And most of the attrition has taken place in the upper school, but due to the COVID environment and all hands on deck caring for the current students, it was deemed unwise to backfill with transfer students in this hybrid distance, striving to be in-person environment. More often than not, if you recall, Andrew has said that students who transition in high school mid-year come in with needing a lot of attention. And so we did take a hit with that. That's about $145,000. We're also receiving a bit less state funding for our school lunch program. Our school lunch program this year is being entirely funded with federal funding, which leads to the federal funding increase of $571,000. 386,000 of that, so $571,000 more than we expected. 386,000 is CARES funding received through Washington County. The federal government allotted Washington County dollars. They in turn allocated a portion to our school, and 259,000 through CARES funding. And then we received ESSER and GEARS funding, which amounted to about $50,000. So that's a big chunk of our additional federal revenue. And the other additional portion is from food service revenue. Our summer school lunch program has been extended through the entire school year. So that's the tool that the federal government is using to reimburse schools for all meals served. So instead of seeing our school lunch revenue in local revenue, which means parents are paying, that's what local revenue is. It's money that the school collects from sources other than the state or the federal government. You'll see a decrease in that, but federal food service revenue is up 184,000. So that's in the plus column. Local revenue is a striking $1.1 million decrease. And in and of itself, it's quite alarming, but if you break it down, there are very few of these dollars actually are a net effect to the bottom line. And I'll just summarize, well, let me tell you what the big dollars are. Fundraising development is $375,000 less than projected, and that is through stalling out on the Together We Stand bleacher campaign of $225,000, and then we've canceled the gala, $150,000 in projected revenue. Extracurricular revenue is down $67,000. 43 of that is just decreased registrations, and another 23 is decreased gate revenue. So for example, all of the expenses I've mentioned so far, but for the decreased gate revenue, also have an offset to decrease in expenses. Fees from patrons, the good old parking permit revenue is down $20,000. That does go a long way to fund the maintenance of our parking lot, but that is a real loss. So far of the expenses I've mentioned, or the revenue loss I mentioned, the fees from patron is a hit to the bottom line, and the gate revenue. All others are offset with decrease in expenses. Fundraising parent group is a loss of $85,000. That is offset with a decrease in expenses. Booster Club also is offset with a decrease in expenses. And the one bright spot in our local revenue is an increase of $25,000 to interest earnings. We conservatively did not budget that last spring, and that is our money market interest. So what is an alarming 1.1 million does not hit the bottom line quite as drastically. On our food service, we do have a decrease of $368,000 on local revenue. That's because $252,000 that we normally collect for food service sales is not being collected. It's being received through the federal government. The net, or that makes up $252,000 of the $386, but also we have a loss of $100,000 in a la carte sales. So all those chips and peanut butter sandwiches and really do add up. And a loss of team meal revenue. And there are some offsets on the expense side for that. Community service, that is primarily our summer camps and fundraising, educational travel fundraising. There's a decrease of $110,000 on that as well. And all but $14,000 of that is offset with a decrease in expenses. So that's our net, summarizes our net revenue decrease of $696,000. If we move to expenditures, we have a reforecasted budget of $14.8 million, down from $15.1 million. So expenses are down $356,000. And some high points on that are in the general ed, Fund 1, Gen Ed, we are down $123,000. And that is largely due to some operational efficiencies. Travel and conferences are down, repairs and maintenance are down, and utilities. So thanks to a mild winter and a little less heavy use on the facility. Food service is down $24,000. That's a reduction of credit card fees and custodial costs. And community service expenses are down, and that is an offset to the community service revenue that's reduced on purchased services. Supplies and materials are down on a variety of funds. Food service funds, $40,000, reduction of food costs due to not purchasing all the a la carte food, and team meal food. So that's an offset to the decrease in revenue on the local revenue side. Fund 4, community service expenses are down $29,000, and that is, let's see, corresponding expense reduction due to COVID-19 related program changes. So that's an offset to summer camps, the cost of fundraising, the cost of operating camps. Equipment, we're able to reduce that $74,000, and that's a Fund 1 cost, cutting efforts. And Fund 2, food service, we have some cost-cutting efforts on equipment, just that we're able to push them out to next year. We can, and we will, and that's what we've done there. And Fund 4, community service equipment that we just weren't purchased because the programming didn't take place. So that totals $74,000 reduction in equipment budget. So those are the large variances on the expense side. And you can see it totals $356,000. All of this nets to a projected net income this year of a negative $280,000. That's down from a projected net income of $60,000, or a net variance of $340,000. I did a lot of numbers being thrown at you, and I did elevate it a bit to just summarize on the single page here, summary of changes which impact the net income. So you can see how we get from a $60,000 net income to just those line items that really affect the bottom line. The COVID-related costs, $236,000. That's COVID-related costs in excess of the federal funding that we received. Enrollment shortfall is $145,000 negative to the bottom line. We are postponing the purchase of the bleachers and press box that we were hoping to order this year. So that is because $120,000 has already been raised. That is an addition to the bottom line. Food service loss is $100,000 net effect on the bottom line. Operational efficiencies, so those expenses that I mentioned that we can do without and push off till next year, or there's just, lower costs in supplies and utilities. That all pieces together to total $100,000. We did approve salary additions in September 2020 that you might recall. The largest item of that was to adjust the EA and parapay. That's a hit of $50,000 that we didn't expect. The interest income I mentioned is in the positive of $25,000. The loss of extracurricular gate revenue of $19,000. Loss of parking lot permit revenue of $20,000. Loss of elimination of program 4 funding netted to $15,000. So all of that nets to a negative $280,000 in projected net income. I do want to note that with our beginning fund balance of $4.6 million, our projected fund balance at June 30th is $4.3 million, which is still within our targeted parameters of debt service coverage ratio of 1.12. Our target is 1.1, and it does exceed our fund balance reserve as a percentage of annual expenditures. Our target is greater than 20%, and this we will maintain at 29.1%. That is all I have. Is there any questions?
Kelly, can I ask a question?
Of course.
So this year kind of took a toll on some of the numbers.
Ugliest one I've ever presented.
Yeah. Could we handle another year like this and still be above all, or would it be a very different story?
We could, and we would still maintain our viability. I'd be concerned about losing enrollment and backfilling and the whole foundational stability. So I think it would create a very unstable environment, but financially we could weather another year like this.
Okay, thanks.
I just have a quick question. So, and I'm not sure if I'm just like maybe missing something, but the budget we approved in May had $4.9 million in salaries, but this one has 5.4, a $500,000 increase. And so I guess I'm just wondering, because looking at the motion from October with the changes, it didn't add. So I guess I was just wondering, was there like a step in there that I missed that things were shifted more?
I'm not sure exactly what you're looking at.
I'm just looking at the May budget that we approved.
And that was for all funds?
General fund?
Yep, and this is for all 3 funds.
Okay.
So you have food service and Fund 2 and Fund 4.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And the variances I presented in September, I was just focusing on Fund 1. So the COVID impact was just Fund 1. We hadn't dug into what was happening with Fund 2, which is food service. So that accounts for that extra $100,000 hit that I didn't imagine. I think we'll be able to. I conservatively forecasted Fund 2, food service. I think we'll have some savings in salaries, and I think estimated food costs. So I'm hopeful that that'll bounce back, but there's so many variables on that front. A positive note on food services, we do have a healthy fund balance, and that this is weathering that hit. So we won't have, statute requires that any negative balances in Fund 2 and Fund 4 are transferred in from Fund 1. So those funds have to balance out at the end of the year. And I'm relieved and pleased to say that that $100,000 will be absorbed in Fund 1 or Fund 2, and will still be in the black. So.
So do you need approval on this, or? No.
Just an acceptance. I'm not asking for a formal budget amendment.
Okay, great.
Sorry, just one more quick question. So this shows that the bond covenant could get kind of close, 1.12. Do you feel like, based on some of the things you just said, you think there might be able to be adjustments so that we would never get closer?
Well, this just happened. This is every year, so this is really lean and close. That would be the closest strain we had if we endured this year next year, would be on the 1.1.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Kelly. All right. So the next item on our agenda is the February 23rd board meeting. And so canceling that meeting and having the March 16th meeting be the next official meeting that we have on our calendar after the RST meeting on the 10th of March. All right.
Is there any wisdom in having the meeting? John's shaking his head, but if we wait till the 16th and there's possibly a transition to in-person learning, we would have, again, this transition of a few days to have a formal announcement to families and staff. So would there be any wisdom in having the board meeting on the 11th, 10th or 11th of March to give people that extra weekend in case we can transition to in-person learning on the 22nd of March? Does that make sense?
Right, which is a Thursday or what day?
A Wednesday or Thursday. The call's on Wednesday.
Right. I mean, I am okay with that. I am not available on that day, but Bob Hilo can lead the meeting. So I don't have a problem with that at all. And if that's okay with everybody else, if you'd prefer to do it on March 11th, I am okay with that.
I'm just opening it up for conversation. If it would benefit families and staff, in case we have to make that quick turnaround.
Right. So we want to have
Give
the
families more
committee
time.
meet. And the two committees meet on the 10th after the RST meeting, you know what I'm saying? Because we wouldn't have much to.
It'll be a quick turnaround.
It'd be a quick turnaround for recommendation, and we really want that recommendation, I would think, so.
Right.
I mean, I'm assuming for the 16th on the Tuesday, you go from Wednesday, then 2 days later, you have the transition teams meeting, and then the board meeting is on the following Tuesday. So, the wisdom there is allowing the process. You have the RST, then you digest the RST. If that group could meet earlier, but I don't know how we can decide for that group if they can meet earlier.
Well, you have the meeting on Friday the 12th,
Yeah.
correct? So. And if the guidance from the governor is different, or if we get the inkling that they're going to change that, we'd have the opportunity we could always call a board meeting even before the RST. If we really had to.
That's why I was suggesting having the motion for that return that, similar to this, when we didn't have the plan in place, that had that kind of plotted out so that there's kind of like that, this is what's likely gonna happen, assuming everything's okay, and then people know and kind of can plan.
I mean, so even if we had the meeting on the 16th, we could still, after our meetings on the 10th and the process with the RST back to school, we'd know on 1 o'clock on Friday what we're going to do, and we could send out communication. This is what the proposal will be to the board. So they would in essence have that information.
Kind of like we did this time.
What's that?
Kind of like what we just did this time.
Yeah.
I don't think there's gonna be a lot of complaints about a faster return to in-person.
Right.
I think parents would
Okay.
rather have less notice, but a return
And-
than push it out.
And basically after tomorrow's call and the RST meeting on Friday, we could be accelerating this based on that information as well. So,
COVID response team.
and back to school committee.
Yeah, but you said RST.
Right. Okay.
All right, so are you thinking the 12th?
No,
Or
I
stay
say
the
we
16th?
just remove this meeting for now. If the need arises to have an emergency board meeting, we can always call one.
All right. Okay, so we're looking for a motion to cancel the February 23rd board meeting.
So moved.
All right, second? Kristen? All right, thank you. All right, any further comments or discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, and that concludes our formal agenda. Did anybody else have any additional comments? Questions? Great, thank you, Kelly, for your work.
A couple things. I'll let people know what happens tomorrow on the call if there's anything of substance. The other thing we're, just operationally, just so you're aware of, I'll let Candace go through this, but vaccinations, you want to talk about that? Number of employees and some potential operational issues we're dealing with? Just so people aren't surprised if, as we're struggling.
Got it. So I don't remember the exact number of employees we've gotten. Do you remember, Kelly?
What was the question?
The number of employees, it's close to all of our employees. They've all been given the opportunity, and it's close to all of ours who've now received their first vaccine. And people are starting to get their second vaccines. And so operationally, the first week in March, we have the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday anywhere from 11 or 12 people a day to up to 27 one day. And there's the potential for side effects with the second dose. There's no scientific number as to where, but anecdotally, we've heard about a third. It's a total guess. People get side effects. And so we're just looking at the cumulative effect of if 10 of our employees on the Tuesday get the vaccine and start having symptoms on their next day, and it seems to be 1 or 2 days, up to 3 days, people have side effects. So that entire week is a potential, I don't know what the word you want to use. Disaster? No. Challenge? A creative challenge.
So we're already trying to get substitutes and that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
So we're working on getting substitutes lined up ahead of time, and just planning for that. But yeah, we're just looking at that week and a little bit into the next week, but mostly that first week in March as being potentially challenging.
Okay. All right, so looking for a motion to adjourn. Nobody? Jake? Or Christoph? Okay, Kristen, second? Yeah. All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. 7:02. Susan, thank you.